Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, A Box with No Lid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the lived realities trauma and complex trauma creates and removal trauma, but I really want to bring what I've learned from my own personal experiences and the many, many years I spent as an advocate and as a practitioner with the simple, humble hope that what you may hear or learn here not only opens the doors of conversations that are so desperately needed, but it hopefully will help improve the quality of your lives. Now, this video I'm following on from the last one, where I was talking about how do you emotionally make sense not being raised by your mom, by your biological mom, the woman who gave birth to you. By how do you emotionally make sense by not being raised by your biological father, the person that is part of your conception, the person that is supposed to be there to support your mother, to be able to raise you, to be part of your life. What does that emotionally mean? This one is a little more challenging to break down and explain because, for one area, in all the many years in the advocacy around adoption, Senate inquiries, state inquiries, federal state apologies, committees, and all and meetings and politicians and blah, 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 the father is very, very rarely raised or talked about. What is a father's role in a child's life? Well, breaking it down, in a biological family, the father's role for the daughter is to teach her how to be safe in connection, how to be safe in interaction, and how to venture out protected and supported. The father is of the opposite gender to the daughter. It teaches her how to interpret appropriate behavior and inappropriate behavior from day one, on every level. Not just the sexualized romantic side of things, but what she is and how she is to accept being treated as a girl growing to become a woman. That is the basic role of a father for a daughter, and supporting her mother to be there in every other way. A father in a biological role for a father's son is a role model, is teaching the son how to interpret and embed his personality, all the aspects of the child growing up to be a man, all the ways of expressing being a man, how to understand the epigenetics, inheritance of perception, interpretation, and response, how to be a productive person, and how to treat the women in their life properly in a more traditional sense, all comes from the father's teachings and the father's actions. A father that a son chooses to emulate out of respect plays a huge role in the development of that child, into that young boy, into becoming a man. Little ideological, but in reality, it's where we are still at internally are these specific roles. And just because in our modern society we think we don't have to respect or honor them, hence the difficulties we have in our societies because we don't, but they are still there in our makeup. And this all changes when you remove a child and place them to be raised in a non-biological family, because as I've said in numerous videos, we have to observe and learn and find ways to translate what we observe purely as an observational process, and then find ways and build pathways to internalize it, to create the understandings that we would just have natural pathways for if we were raised by a biological family. So what does it emotionally mean when we are not raised by a biological father? Well, for girls, for daughters in step families, in foster families, and in adoption families, how is a young girl to learn appropriate physical interaction from a non-biological male, related male? Where are those lines? Where are the lines that are correct? Where are the lines that are incorrect? Have a think about that one. It is a rabbit hole that is very, very scary to go down. And yes, in the world that is adoption and foster care, every form of abuse is contained within that rabbit hole. I personally know of so many horrific stories of what girls and women have experienced through foster care and adoption because of that simple issue right there. Where are the appropriate boundaries? when you're not biologically related for a male to interact with a female. And then you take those boundaries and put in how's the girl to learn to connect, to interact, to be in relationships and functional in relationships, to value herself, to value her sensuality and all the components that is feminine. All those structures are supported by the responses of the men in her life, the father, and any brothered siblings, older siblings especially. Teach the woman to be grounded in her femininity and everything she is. All of that changes when you take out the biological markers. There is also the same thing as I've spoken in other videos about the father deficit. When the father is not there, there is the pursuit of fulfilling that void, disproportionately attaching to guys that are not appropriate for relationships. It opens up a whole can of very complicated worms that nobody ever wants to talk about. Hence, as I said, within all the inquiries and in meetings and everything, the father is never really discussed because of this. But the one component I want you guys to seriously think about is, where is the lines of appropriate physical intimacy between a non-biologically related adult male and a little girl? How do you define that? How do you keep it right? How do you keep it supportive? How do you keep it healthy? And how do you keep it long-term on both sides right? Work that can of worms out in your own selves, and you understand what are the complexities on one side of adoption and foster care placements. Then you have to look at the father for the son. You know, when a boy is raised in a non-biological household and the father figure there, the non-biological father, how are we supposed to emulate someone we're not related to? So their priorities, their emotional priorities, and the personality and everything else is so foreign to us. We either make it everything we are is wrong to try to be accepted, which is the more common path, or it grows in a way of being a loggerhead relationship. So to use an easy example to explain this, if you have an adoptee that comes from working family where everything, the father and grandfather did everything with their hands, and they are placed in adoption in an academic family, and the father is a professor, they're not going to relate. The son is going to grow up in a household where he's not academically inclined, and everything is going to be a reminder that he is not good enough, which feeds into the whole adoption scenario. We're not good enough to be raised by our biological family, our biological mom, and so forth and so forth. And I see these play out. I personally know someone in my street, there was 5 adoptees other than me. Out of the 7 of us, because I have an adopted brother, out of the 7 of us, there are only 2 of us alive, myself and my adopted brother. All the others passed, not through natural causes. Within this sphere, the anger that was created in this one adoptee, he came from a working family, was placed in an academic household because he never met the academic challenges that was placed before him. He was outcast, and that resentment built to the life he created, which was built around anger and addiction. These are the issues that nobody wants to talk about when you look at the reality of placing children. Everybody wants the pretty pictures of a giggling little toddler being made a fuss over. Nobody wants to understand the complexities of how do you integrate non-biological family into a functional family. There is no thought to it. And those of us that live it and are raised within it, it's on us to try to make sense of it. How do I make sense of who I am as a man when I have nothing in common with my adopted father? Our values, our identities, what we pursue are completely different. Every conversation I ever had with him became an argument because we didn't relate. What I valued was not important to him, and what he valued makes no sense to me. And this is an obstacle I've seen play out so many times, even in more functional adoption families. I see these play out so many times, and it does create a marked obstacle in our lives. As I said, the main thing I want to get across in this video is understanding what it means, or what are the emotional choices that we have to make as removed children in our placement to be part of. With how do we process not being raised by our mom? How do we process by not being raised by our biological father? And all that implies, and all the difficulties that are dumped on us to try to work out, or more often than not are ignored, and it creates paths that lead to destruction and lead to real, very real world hardship and very real world struggle. A lot of this gets brushed to one side until we start to, like me, when you start hearing the stories and speaking to the people as they're telling their stories, and how it tears your heart in half with what they've endured. Not only is my story, but I mean so many stories of what they've endured because it's simple, they were placed in the wrong family, the wrong personalities. There weren't enough similarities in how their biological family were within the family that they were placed in. That's one of the steps that is a solution to this. There are many steps that need to be taken to solutions, and all of them revolve around conversations that we all need to have, not just those of us that live it, but those of us that are around us. I really hope you guys value this, and I really hope you actually take the time and ask yourself some of these questions that are raised in this video and some of the other videos, the last few videos, because it is helpful for us who live it, because we need help in explaining it so we can develop and heal and become part of the lives we so desperately seek. I really love you guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, please be respectful, and I'll see you all next time.